Who doesn't love conflicting advice? Well, most people don't. Should entry-level marketers seek to start brand side or is agency side better? It all depends on who you ask and when you ask them. Who is more marketable in the future? What's right for you in your career? What responsibilities do you actually want? Marketing and sales are full of myths, misconceptions, and sometimes even flat-out lies. Join us as we leave the echo chamber and chat about our experience climbing up the marketing ranks.
Hello and welcome to the Rethink Marketing Podcast, where we try to give alternative options for marketing professionals. I'm Paul Frodge, joined by Mr. Marketing, and for today's conversation, the masterful marketer of migration, Colin Jeffries. Colin, how are we doing today?
Oh man, Paul, I feel great. I feel about as good as an entry-level marketer who gets consistent advice from senior-level marketers. How about you?
I would agree. I think that that kind of advice can go all over the place. It's one of those things where oftentimes when I'm interviewing at the agency, it's something that entry level opportunities exist, and we can get a lot of great talent that way at the agency. So interested to get into this topic and figure out your side from the brand side and the actual client side of things.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess I'll tee us up by talking about what we are rethinking today, Paul, which is there's a lot of conflicting advice out there for early career marketers as to whether they should start or pivot very quickly into agency life, or if they should start or pivot very quickly into brand side or client side. And we'll be using the word brand side and client side, I think, pretty interchangeably today. Agency side stands alone by itself. So which one is right and for whom are they right? I guess, Paul, since you lead an agency, do you want to start with some of the pros of agency life?
Yeah, absolutely. The pros of agency life, in my opinion, are that you get to learn so many different brands, so many different industries. Obviously, every agency is different. A lot of agencies focus on certain verticals or industries, and some are widespread, like we are here. And it's an opportunity to every day you could be working on automotive in the morning and look at healthcare in the afternoon, retail the next day, and B2B, a couple days later. So it's very fast paced. And I like that when you're just getting into it or a seasoned veteran. It's an opportunity to really have something new and fresh every day. And those that like to learn, those that like to study and do research, I think it could be a good opportunity for anybody on the agency side for sure.
I agree completely. I'll add to that for entry-level marketers who want to move up in their careers, agency life tends to have two distinct benefits that, again, in addition to everything that you just said. One is portfolio development. When you think about building credibility by working with 5 or 10 or 15 brands in a couple of years, that's just something you cannot get client side that you get very easily agency side. And the second thing is agencies tend to send a lot more people to networking events and like American Marketing Association types events, those sorts of things. And then obviously summits and conferences. So that way they can develop more recognition and sell easier. It's a good way to build pipeline. B, it helps them to create the awareness and build some additional credibility there. Right, we were at cons or Inbound or some of these big conferences geared toward marketers. And then C is it just allows their people to upskill. So they're at these events and they're learning what's on the cutting edge and what's new, and then they're able to go take that to clients. So agency side, I think, has a ton of advantages for entry-level marketers. Now we can pivot over to client side. Paul, obviously you've worked client side as well. Do you want to kick this one off for us too?
Yeah, absolutely. On the client side, I feel like you can really go deep into the learnings and into that industry more so when you are at that level, and the opportunities to really work with a team that is all focused on the same service or product and really expand that knowledge in that certain industry.
Absolutely. I think deep expertise is one of the huge advantages that I've seen on client side that you may not get agency side. And part of this, I think, depends on what type of environment that a person likes to work in. If you really love being a deep expert in one thing, selling your ideas taking ownership of those ideas and then watching them grow over time, brand side might actually be better than agency side because unfortunately, sometimes with an agency, you spend time building out ideas and then selling them to person A in the client. Then person A goes and they have to sell them to persons, B, C, and D. And then those people have to go sell them up to the area vice president or the GM or what have you. And so by the time the ideas that you pitched in the agency meeting actually get implemented at the brand side, it can be a long time later. Sometimes you have to wait for a budget to clear and those sorts of things. So agency side, I think, is good for people who are looking to build their portfolio and network and grow and upskill personally. And brand side tends to be a little bit more attractive to folks who like to have ownership and they like to have control, particularly over the strategy. There are certainly agencies that come in that are strategic partners and really help those clients build out their strategic plan and execute against that. But most of the time, in my experience, and Paul, feel free to disagree with me, the client is coming to the agency and saying, here's our annual budget, here's our strategy, here are our key performance indicators, here's the growth goals that we're trying to hit. How do we get there? Versus the agency saying, here's the growth target that you should look for based on your industry or what have you. So again, it depends on your personality, I think.
I would agree. And looking at a lot of the clients that we work with, oftentimes those marketing teams are coming to us and saying, we are too close to this. We need some fresh new ideas and the opportunity to look at that and to use other examples of what has worked, even with other industries in marketing, and coming to that to the table and thinking outside the box by having a more of an array of opportunities to bring to that table is really a good thing from the agency perspective. And those marketing teams on the brand side or client side are really looking for something outside of the box and opportunities to bring to them. So I think that can be a really good advantage from working with an agency versus those that are too close to it.
That's a really good point, Paul, because agency side, there are pretty much no sacred cows, right? Like maybe you hear this client likes this particular communication style or that client likes this dashboard or what have you. But really, when folks are coming in and saying, how do we get more customers? How do we increase share of wallet? How do we drive up share of voice or something of that nature, right? They're not coming in and saying, well, we've always done it this way. They're coming in and saying, what can we do that's new on the agency side? On brand side, I wish that were the case. Unfortunately, oftentimes on brand side, you do hear, well, that's not how we do it around here. Or, well, the vice president or the president or the GM or whoever, they're never going to buy into that. So that's a really good point too, is it, again, there's not really a right answer or a wrong answer here. I think both, if you can get both, are great. But I will say some of the challenges with being brand side are that it's often much more difficult to switch brand side back into or initially into agency than it is to go agency to brand side. That's been my experience, at least.
Yeah, that's a good point. Looking at this, and the topic for today is really looking of how somebody should start their marketing career, and looking at a brand or looking at an agency, and what advice makes sense. I agree with you. It's a coin flip, in my opinion. I've interviewed candidates in the past to where they've gotten advice from others in their sphere of influence or in their network, and it's oftentimes when they're interviewing at some larger agencies where the advice is you can't just come into an agency and start here. You need to have experience. And we've talked about that on a previous podcast and looking at, well, you can't really get that experience unless you start somewhere. Those that are giving that advice, where did they start? So, yeah, it's interesting to see what advice that those are that are out there that are giving. But in my opinion, at our agency, we've had a lot of people that have started here that have had no agency experience. They may have started on a brand side or fresh out of college, and to get the proper training and to learn from the ground up. It's oftentimes like a baseball analogy of the farm team, right? It's are you going to groom those marketing professionals internally your way and the way that the agency works, or are you going to have somebody that has had some great experience at other agencies or on the brand side and bring them into the agency. I think it can go both ways.
Absolutely. I'll say in favor of smaller agencies and smaller brands. Typically, if you are entry level at a small brand and a small agency, you get to wear a lot of hats. You get to do a lot of things. You might even have very strong or very big influence over that brand's direction, over that brand's revenue, over that brand's social presence. Fill in the blank here with whatever your responsibilities are. But I've seen a lot of folks start at, sub $100 million brands, and it's their first, second, third, fourth, fifth year out of school. And they're having major impact on the direction of that brand because they're able to get their tentacles into a lot of different things. Cut away to some folks who are working for multi-billion-dollar global brands, and they're 7, 8 years out of school, barely having an impact on that brand, on the share of voice, on the revenue, on those sorts of things, because they're in such a niche sort of restricted role. Again, if you like a lot of structure, a really big brand might be somewhere that you're comfortable. If you like very little structure, an agency, particularly a smaller agency or a smaller brand, might be somewhere that's a lot more attractive to you. So this is not to parse out the conversation too much, Paul, but I think we can look at huge conglomerate type brands, very small brands, very small agencies, and then very big, again, global agencies. And there's a lot of interplay between what those roles and the career development looks like. We're kind of painting with a broad brush here. And I'll say maybe with this conversation, we're focusing on sort of mid-sized businesses and maybe smaller mid-sized agencies. Frankly, I think that's where we find very talented individuals who want to hustle and they want to have impact and they want to really grow in their careers. And those are probably the kind of folks that are going to listen to a podcast like this and say, if I want to maximize my career upside, am I best to have a foundation at a small brand or a medium-sized brand, or am I best to have a foundation agency side at like a smaller, medium-sized agency?
That's a great point. I have a lot of friends that work at Procter and Gamble, and over the years of their career, they've worked at many different brands within the P&G umbrella, and have worked their way up into different roles within Procter and Gamble. And the opportunity. Some of them got a great career with Procter and Gamble right out of school, but a lot of them were working at another agency and then went to Procter and Gamble, or they started with Tide and now are working with a deodorant brand or something like that. So there's some opportunities out there for getting into the bigger companies. But what you mentioned is the smaller to medium sized brands and being able to really have an influence with those smaller to medium sized brands. It's a great point, and being able to really show what you can do and the opportunities to really be an influence with those is a great opportunity. It's interesting when you think of smaller agencies to medium-sized agencies and the brands that we're working with. We've had P&G as a client in the past, but a lot of the clients that we're working with are the small to medium-sized businesses, and being able to really show attribution and the return on investment for their spend, and those that actually value our opinion and are really able to show the opportunities for conversion. So I like this conversation. I think it could go either way. Looking at the opportunity for those that are entering the workforce right out of school. I'm biased to the agency side of things now after the last 7 years of owning my own business, but I do like the client side as well, and that's where you're at. I'd love to hear your opinion.
Absolutely. Frankly, to your point, I don't think you can go wrong either way. I would say there are a few things to look for. One is variance of responsibility. So if I'm new in my marketing career or relatively new, I want to do a lot of different things to develop expertise. Two is understanding key performance indicators and metrics around those. So one of the nice things about being agency side is you have to report out on impressions, share of wallet, those sorts of things, right? Here's what we're accomplishing and here's how we know that we're doing a good job. If you're brand side, typically if you're running in-house campaigns, you're looking at key performance indicators as well, but you're also looking at things like revenue, customer lifetime value, return on ad spend, et cetera. Again, not better or worse. Both of those I think can be good. So understanding the logistics and the numbers behind marketing efforts is really important. Third is networking. I think that's really important as well. Typically, what I've seen is agency side employees have much better networks because they're going to more conferences. They're working with a lot of marketing people, and anybody that comes into an agency and then leaves the agency typically is a marketing person, and they're leaving to go into a marketing role. Versus if you're working for a real estate developer or an automotive group or a B2B SaaS company, right? You might have a lot of coworkers that are in accounting or in finance or in sales or in operations or fill in the blank. And when they're leaving and they're going to other organizations, they're working in human resources, they're working in product development, they're working in innovation, they're not necessarily working in marketing. So I think networking is something where if you choose to be client side, which again, I have chosen to be client side most of my career, and I think that for me, that's been really good. But I've looked at other areas to build my network, like going to events or being involved in a local networking group, like a chamber of commerce or something of that nature, to assist with that. Again, there are deficits and there are benefits to client side and to agency side. And as long as we recognize those and we can offset them a little bit, then we can be very successful in our career. One thing that I've seen to be very beneficial for being client side, Paul, is when somebody's earlier in their career, they're able to get direct mentorship from a chief marketing officer, a head of marketing, a marketing director, whatever that person's title is. They're able to spend some individual time building into and developing and hopefully recognizing some good skills and some good upside in new team members. Agencies sometimes can be so focused on everybody's in marketing, everybody's doing the same thing, that there's not good mentorship structure. Again, you have much more agency experience than I do. Do you want to speak to mentorship opportunities and upskilling and growth opportunities for younger employees?
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends on the agency. It depends on what the training program and the process is there. What I feel like most agencies, looking at that mentorship, you bring up a great point, and it's an opportunity if the proper process is in place for that training, where you can have somebody that's a senior leader in the organization really take somebody under their wing and have weekly meetings, or meet with them more often to train them, not just on their particular role, but opportunities within the agency as well. So what I like about the small to medium sized shops is, that opportunity to really be collaborating around a table of team of professionals and experts with every different area of marketing. When I look at the small to medium sized client side or brand side, oftentimes what I notice is they are also wearing multiple hats. And so you can find organizations out there, like the one that you work at, where you have a team of marketing professionals that are all sitting there and talking about, your brand. And what I've seen with some of our clients, though, is that they don't have a full marketing department. They might have a marketing director, maybe not even a CMO, maybe a VP of marketing, and not a team around them, right? So you bring the CEO into the conversation, you bring the COO into the conversation. They aren't doing that mentorship because they don't know the marketing side of things. So it really depends on the client that we're working with to see what is the makeup of that actual marketing team. But I could see it both ways. I think that it's an opportunity where you need to take a step back when you're entering the workforce, and if you are in marketing, and decide what you want to do as a recent college graduate or somebody that only has a couple of years of experience, and determine if it's something that you really want to really get deep with one organization and really understand that product or service, or if it's something that you want something to be ever changing and the opportunity to really work in a fast-paced environment and the opportunity to really learn many different clients and many different industries.
Well said, Paul. Like you alluded to, I don't know that there's a one size fits all answer, as is the case with a lot of current marketing advice, especially when it's conflicting like this. You talk to some brand side folks, they'll say start brand side. You talk to some agency side folks, they'll say start agency side. You talk to agency folks that will say start brand side, and vice versa too. So I think it depends on who you ask, when you ask them, how they're feeling about their current role and their career and all that stuff. But I do recognize as well that not every new grad or person who's entry level in marketing has their pick of the litter when it comes to their career as well. So Maybe it's a situation where you sort of take what you can get and then you look at switching into an agency or switching into a brand a little bit later. But we appreciate everybody's time and attention today, and we look forward to reconnecting next week with our latest episode of the Rethink Marketing Podcast. Until then, keep rethinking those common assumptions and keep rethinking whether you want to work agency side or brand side. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If people want to connect with us, where should they go, Paul?
RethinkMarketingPodcast.com, Colin. What can listeners do to help us in return for the sage marketing wisdom and our pithy humor?
They can help us by leaving a review on their favorite platform or sharing this episode with a fellow marketer to help them cut through the clutter.
Well, until next time, keep rethinking those common assumptions.